Thank you, Excellencies, for giving the interview.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Let me ask for the first question. As Women International Day, how do you view Myanmar transition to democracy? It is encouraging, or you see failure in the process?
Well, as you know, we've for a long time strongly supported the Myanmar people's desire for democracy, and we're pleased with all the progress that's been made in recent years. But I think what I hear from Myanmar friends and my own assessment right now, Myanmar is going through a very difficult time, a really challenging time. It's also a really important time, and what happens in the coming months and year will I think, go a long way to determining how successful Myanmar's democratic transition is.
Yeah. So how do you view Myanmar government challenge, and why this transition is trouble?
Well, I think democratic transitions are never easy. They always take time. I think it's fair to say that this government came in facing a lot of challenges because of the history after 50 years of military rule and a lot of isolation, and a government, a party that didn't have previous experience ruling. So it's not surprising that it's difficult. But then we see some unexpected developments, certainly the crisis in Rakhine State with lots of violence and widespread allegations of serious human rights abuses. You see challenges vis-a-vis the military because we're still dealing with a constitution that frankly isn't really consistent with full democracy. So you have that challenge. And then we're seeing over the last year, as you would know, some concerning things happening in terms of media freedom, freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly, these sorts of things that my Myanmar friends tell me they're very concerned about.
Yes. People think that is a military wrote 2008 constitution. So can you a little bit tell about our constitution?
Sure. Well, of course, the Constitution was approved, was drafted and then approved in 2008 in that referendum just after Cyclone Nargis. And I think most people here, as well as around the world, recognized quickly that the Constitution was not really consistent with democracy in the sense of the military and the security forces not being accountable to civilian authorities, and the military having right to 25 seats in parliament. Now, it's up to the Myanmar people, of course, to decide on the constitution they want. But I think what we saw in the 2015 election was people voted overwhelming for more democracy.
Right, thank you. What is your reading of any approach to changing the constitution?
Well, I think it's a challenge because the State Councilor and others have made clear their views that they want to support and promote constitutional reform, but of course they can't do that without getting some support from the military MPs, and so far that support has not been forthcoming. So I don't blame the NLD for that. I think that's just a reality and one that is critical, I think, for the whole country going forward.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. How do you view the State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi position? How much power does she really have?
Well, you know, we have always had a great appreciation for the important role that she's played, particularly since 1988, and continues to play. I think it's also important not to put all the responsibility and burdens on one person, even someone as well-known and intelligent as Aung San Suu Kyi. But I think certainly the civilian authority has some power. They have a majority in parliament, so they have the ability to change laws, and I think that's important. But in other areas, particularly oversight of the security forces, they clearly lack power, and that's a problem for Myanmar's democracy.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And we get the impression that Myanmar relationship with the United States is strained at the moment due to the Rakhine crisis. So how do you view on this?
I would say is this. I've been working on Myanmar-U.S. relations for a long time. And really since 1988, even before. Our position has always been we want to support the Myanmar people and organizations that are trying to promote democracy and human rights and rule of law and peace and prosperity. we've been very consistent. That's exactly what we're doing now. Sometimes throughout these 30 years, when we've seen things that we thought were really troubling, we have said so. Whether it was the 1988 uprising and what happened after that, the Saffron Revolution in 2007, and now we see some really troubling developments in Rakhine State, as well as in Kachin and northern Shan, and vis-a-vis media freedom. So this is very consistent with what we've always said. We want to continue to promote those people in Myanmar who are promoting democracy and rule of law. And sometimes that leads us to speak up as a friend and as a supporter of democracy in a way that isn't always popular. And that does sometimes create strains. But I feel like we've got to be a good friend to all the people of Myanmar. And we feel like we're doing that. Sometimes being a good friend requires us or calls for us to have some difficult conversations.
Yeah, thank you. And how does Washington view on the criticism of Myanmar handling the Rakhine crisis?
Well, I think a couple things are important here. First, I notice a tendency here among some people to say, you know, the world or the United States has somehow turned against Myanmar over this crisis. And I want to stress that's absolutely not the case. We're very committed to Myanmar's future. But two things I would highlight. One is ARSA carried out those attacks, first in October 2016 and then again in August 2017. We condemn them absolutely. We have no sympathy for ARSA. But then in response to those attacks, the security forces went far beyond an appropriate response. And there's increasing evidence that in doing so, they inflicted widespread human rights abuses, really significant and horrific abuses. So internationally, the world will always be deeply concerned about something like that happening, whether it's in Myanmar or any other place. So that's just a reality. But the second thing is we think that for Myanmar to have success in building democracy and rule of law, it's really important that Myanmar tackle this issue very openly and transparently and address it. And it's not, I want to stress, this isn't about who has citizenship or are they citizens or residents or illegal immigrants. That's an important issue, but it's a different issue. What we're talking about is human beings who are living in Myanmar, who suffered terribly because of these abuses. And I think, I want to believe that it's in Myanmar's interest to try to address this, what happened, as honestly and forthrightly as possible.
Yeah, thank you. And when the National League for Democracy came to power, Myanmar came to power, that Myanmar relationship was China was closer compared with the relationship and former President Thein Sein. So how is now? How is now? Can you tell me?
Well, I think it's not for me to sort of assess the relationship between Myanmar and China. I think that's for those, the Myanmar and Chinese governments. What I would say is, for us, this isn't about China this is about Myanmar. We want Myanmar to be successful, peaceful, prosperous. To do that, we think and we expect Myanmar will want to have good relations with a lot of countries, and certainly its important neighbors like China. So I want to stress, this isn't about China. This is about doing all we can to support Myanmar.
Yeah. Former President Barack Obama was very good relationship with Aung San Suu Kyi. What about now with relationship with President Donald Trump?
Well, President Trump and Aung San Suu Kyi haven't had as much opportunity to talk as perhaps former President Obama did with Aung San Suu Kyi. But I think what's important, again, it's not just about the personalities, it's about the U.S. government and the Myanmar government. I think the relationship remains good. There are some strains, as you said, that's just a reality. But we're very committed to working through those and to continuing to do all we can to support Myanmar's democratic transition and to try to help Myanmar deal with these current challenges that it faces.
Yes, thank you. A great deal of attention from around the world has been focused on Rakhine and the case of two writer journalists in charge.
Yes.
So under all official secret law, right? So how do you view on this case?
Yeah, 2 points on that. First, I think we should look at the Reuters case also in the context of the general environment for the media here. And as you know, there's been a number of journalists who have been arrested, charged, and prosecuted for basically doing things that in other democratic countries would be legal and fully consistent with the work of journalism. That certainly includes the Reuters journalists. So the impact on media freedom is significant. And for all the viewers here, you can't build a democracy without a strong and independent media. Secondly, it's not for me to comment on the court proceedings per se in your country, but a lot of Myanmar colleagues who have followed the trial, and it was good that it was open, have expressed a lot of concern about whether it really resulted in justice. So from both a justice rule of law perspective, but also from a media and democracy perspective, the case is very troubling.
Yeah, thank you. Not just Myanmar, but several countries of ASEAN country, right? Democracy, freedom of press, freedom of speech seems to be under attack. So how do you view the situation Southeast Asia?
Well, I think everywhere you have democracy, or you have people trying to build democracy, it's always a challenge. You always have to push hard for your freedoms, including media freedom. As ambassador to Myanmar, I don't really want to comment about other countries in the region, other than to say, it's really important for people to recognize the importance of freedom of press, not because it's an abstract value that the Americans or the Westerners support, but because how do you have democracy where you hold your leaders and elected officials and everyone else accountable, whether it's on corruption or abuse of power things, if the media can't report freely? And so I think it's really important to continue to struggle for freedom of the media.
Thank you. That last question. What are your hopes from Myanmar democratic transition?
Yeah, my hope is the same as it's always been. We want to see as strong a democracy as possible here, where everybody in the country enjoys their rights. We want peace, and we want economic prosperity. We want Myanmar to be successful. That's why we're here. Americans have a special feeling toward the Myanmar people. We admire how much you've struggled and how many people here have sacrificed for so many years. And you've made progress, and we don't want it to stop now. We want you to continue to make more progress.
Yes. Anything? Do you want to add anything?
I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.